We had been out, we came back here. There was a little card in the door from Constable Walsh saying that would we contact him.
I was here.
Mark and I were here.
I was at my house.
I was home.
I was at my parents' house. Around 6 p.m., I was passing through the living room on the way to meet friends for dinner. They told me to sit down. One year earlier, I'd begun shooting a memory album for Zachary about his father. I just spent the entire summer of 2003 traveling the globe gathering interviews for it. I just met Zachary a few weeks earlier. I had shown footage of him to my then 4-year-old nephew when I got home. He said he couldn't wait to meet the baby. He and his brother made Zachary a Build-A-Bear.
And who's this bear for, Lucas?
Zachary. Aww.
Now, my audience was dead. So I put my project away. I finished a short film I'd been working on. I wrote more scripts. I shot one more interview when I was home for Christmas that year, but I wasn't really sure why. Andrew had always loved Christmas, and he had a passion for putting up holiday decorations. Kate and David had not decorated for Christmas since Andrew's murder in 2001. Finally, I had a breakthrough. I remembered that I had first decided to make this project within 24 hours of hearing about Andrew's death, for friends and family, and as a way for recipients of his scholarship funds to learn about him, before I'd ever known there was even going to be a Zachary. I had to finish it for them and for myself. So, in the summer of 2004, I went back on the road to finish what I'd started. When I reached Newfoundland after a very long ferry voyage and a bout of food poisoning that made me vomit constantly as I drove across the island, a bit of advice on the ferry: don't order the cheeseburger. I spent much of the week shooting an interview with Kate and David.
The less light you put on my face, the better the picture will look.
And it was then that I discovered.
I am writing a book about this.
And that was when I finally understood what I had to do. I had to put this project out publicly, as a call for change, as a companion piece to David's book. Over the next 2 years, I grabbed interviews in my spare time. David and Kate moved back to California. I read drafts of his book to increase my knowledge of the case. And I finally worked up the guts to ask Kate and David for the recordings I knew they'd made of their conversations with the murderer, originally meant to be used in a custody hearing. Listening to those was the hardest part of making the film.
The previous conversation finished recording at about 1:23 in the afternoon.
In the summer of 2006, David landed a publisher for his book, Dance with the Devil, Key Porter Books in Canada. It would be released in the spring of 2007. I realized I'd better hurry up and finish my movie. I finally reviewed and cataloged the 300 hours of footage I'd shot. I traveled to Canada for one last week of shooting and the child death review was finally released. But I had a problem. I needed to finish quickly and didn't have the money. So I cut together a 10-minute trailer telling people what we were doing and why, that all the film's proceeds would go toward Andrew's scholarship funds. My friend Dan Goldwasser designed a website. We spread the word. And what happened next was literally like the final scene of It's a Wonderful Life. The movie together in 2 months, scored it in 1 month, finished the sound in another. I targeted the Toronto International Film Festival. Since it was a Canadian story, I figured we'd do well to start there. They rejected the film. So I targeted the Sundance Film Festival.
Hi, Kirk. This is David Courier returning your call from the Sundance Film Festival regarding Dear Zachary. We were unable to program the film, though I do think it's a terrific documentary. Best of luck to you.
But the Slamdance Film Festival, a concurrent festival that sprang up in Park City 14 years earlier to embrace the worthy films Sundance overlooked, loved the film and invited us.
Well, here we are on our way to the first show.
Your destiny is mere minutes away.
I'm doing the tech check, the sound and everything beforehand.
Can you do that one more time? I think I'm gonna have to pass off the Q&A to someone else less emotional. I can't do it. I cried in the hallway.
I'm sad. I'll tell you about it someday.
I guess I can tell you that if I have to lose my biological son, I'll take this one instead. Everybody who knew Andrew.
Could you guys stand up?
The website, dearzachary.com, has a new link that just went up this week to support bail reform. You click on it.
You do a little study, a little research, find out where presumption of innocence comes from, you find that Canada has taken it and stretched it way out of bounds compared to the rest of the civilized world. And yes, I'm still just as mad as I was on that screen.
Between the first and second screenings, our sales rep, Josh Braun, made a television deal for Dear Zachary with MSNBC. It was the first feature film they'd ever acquired, and they made it the flagship film for their new label, MSNBC Films. They decided to put it on the air that December, 11 months later. In the meantime, we continued to play festivals all over the continent and get the word out.
Judge Green said to her one day, "I'm so sorry, Dr. Turner, your life is on hold." And I wanted to scream, "My son's life is on hold forever, and you have the audacity to apologize to this accused murderer."
As a group, judges are sitting in their ivory towers and have not been down to the morgue and touched the wet blood. They don't have a freaking clue how horrible this is.
Actually, can everyone who knew Andrew who's in the audience please stand up?
And they're willing to risk letting it happen again based on the legal doctrine of presumption of innocence. Very important legal doctrine. I'm not against it, not even close. Its value is in the trial courtroom. At its core, presumption of innocence says to the jury, if you're not sure of guilt, presume innocence. If you're in that middle ground, you gotta go innocent. Perfectly valid. But risking lives while you get there is insane.
It's not going to change unless a whole bunch of people tell members of Parliament in Canada to change it.
I cannot stress it enough. It's your move now. It's got to you. You got to tell them because they work for you.
It's your move. I ask you to tell them if someone is accused of murder, deny bail, get to the trial, get to the truth, quit the legal masturbation that takes place every day in your courtrooms and ours in America.
While it's high enough, they will have to pay attention.
That summer, a brand new company called Oscilloscope Laboratories decided to pick up Dear Zachary as their third title. They put it in theaters, on DVD, gave it a fabulous campaign, and it picked up year-end critical attention. Once it began to show on MSNBC, letters began to flood in. I wrote back to every single person I could and asked viewers to write letters to Parliament. Prior to the film's Canadian premiere at the Hot Docs International Film Festival in Toronto that April, I wrote letters to all 413 members of Canada's Parliament requesting the opportunity to screen the film for them. A lot of them ignored me, but one man in particular took an interest in helping me get a screening set up. Senator Tommy Banks of Alberta, a noted pianist, composer, and conductor. My kind of guy. Senator Banks came to see the movie at the Edmonton International Film Festival in Alberta, where he met David. Another letter was answered by a Senate whip who put me in touch with a lobbyist named Gord McIntosh, who told me to rent a theater in Ottawa near Parliament Hill. And with his and Senator Banks' support, we invited everyone in Parliament, 413 MPs and senators, to the show. About 30 people showed up, most of them staff. My stomach sank.
3 of us showed up out of 413.
As the screening rolled, I thought to myself, oh well, I tried. But I dragged Kate and David up to the front of the theater before the credits began so no one could have a chance to leave. We proceeded to have our usual Q&A, then we finally asked who was going to champion us. Scott Andrews spoke up. A new member of Parliament from Newfoundland, he was very affected by the film, and right there in the lobby of the theater, he and Senator Banks created a plan for a bill to amend Canadian bail law. We wanted a law denying bail to people accused of first-degree murder until trial, which states like California and Pennsylvania have here in the United States. They wouldn't go for that since it limited a judge's discretion. After much spirited debate, we finally arrived at a compromise that could have saved Zachary and had a good chance of getting passed. An amendment to the bail code granting judges the power to deny bail to someone accused of a serious crime who is deemed a potential danger to children under 18. It was called Bill C-464, an act to amend the criminal code. They asked me for 413 DVDs to distribute to all the MPs and senators who had skipped the screening.
413.
I'll have them do next week.
They got them. I got MSNBC to sublicense the film to CBC in Canada, who put it on the air the same weekend that our bill was introduced in the House. I got MSNBC to convince NBC to do a Dateline piece on the case.
We couldn't let the authorities who let this happen get away with it.
An entire year went by. But eventually, it was debated in the House of Commons.
And in late March, I received an invitation to attend a special screening of the documentary Dear Zachary.
It's almost difficult to explain in words the feelings that anyone watching this case would experience.
It was recently aired on CBC's W5. I had many calls from across Canada supporting this initiative.
We can learn from the way we failed Zachary.
If we can protect the innocents and the children of our country, then this legislation is deemed worthy.
When determining if an accused person should be released from custody, Courts will be expressly reminded to consider the safety and protection of all children affected by the accused person's release.
I want to pay respect to Zachary's grandparents, Kate and David Bagby.
Last week, David and Kathleen Bagby appeared to assist the committee in its consideration of Bill C-464, unanimously supported by the Standing Committee for Justice and Human Rights.
I very much support this bill.
I would like to indicate the government's support for this bill, Zachary's bill.
I urge this House to give this bill its full support.
There are times when we can work across party lines when an issue is that important.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried unanimously.
It is now off to the Senate, and I urge the Senate's speedy passage of this bill.
I'm going to just impose on your courtesy to say hello to Kate and David. Hello, Bagby.
Hello.
I wish you were here.
And we would have come if we'd have known. Even though I had my cataract surgery yesterday, I was going to cancel that if we could get a flight. We would like people to know that this does mean such a lot to us.
I highly commend cataract surgery. I've just had it.
I didn't see the documentary, but I saw a Dateline, I think at NBC, with Keith Morrison, which was very moving.
If this provision had been in place in January of 2003, the Crown prosecutor might have been prodded to ask for the prison records on Shirley. They clearly showed that she was unstable, and that information might have resulted in denial of bail and hence the survival of Zachary. Now, because I will probably never again have the chance to make this argument directly to a group of lawgivers, I will summarize the case for blanket denial of bail to anyone accused of murder.
We tried to bring down the hammer real big on this, but we knew that we wouldn't get it through.
It may be for others at other times to go further than this. We chose, in the present instance, as Mr. Andrews has said, to take the first small step.
Please let it pass.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And finally, on December 15th, 2010, it doesn't bring either of them back, but it's the best we can get. We hope it will save lives. We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that in the past 5 years, 11 people have written to us to say that watching the film made them decide not to commit suicide. The reasons vary. Some were inspired by Andrew himself and how the testimony of his friends proved that one life matters. Others were inspired by Kate and David, realizing that if the two of them could make it through something this horrible, then maybe they could too. And then there was the scared pregnant teenage girl who realized that if Kate and David could love Zachary, even though he was half Andrew's killer, then maybe her family could learn to love her child too. We set out to effect change, but we never expected this. And to everyone who's written to us, for letting us know that Andrew and Zachary matter to you, we are truly grateful.
It's a wrap.
But I think the part of this journey that meant the most to me was the night that December, 2 weeks after the bill became law, that I went to Kate and David's home for dinner and saw that for the first time in 9 years, they had decorated for Christmas.
Are you having trouble with that one?
We really want to thank everybody who saw Dear Zachary and or read Dance with the Devil and
very, very ashamed.
actually took the time to write their member of Parliament or the Minister of Justice. And they're the ones who were essential to getting the bail reform bill passed.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
And
Same to you.
All
Let's
right,
have another drink.